Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the webinar about Universal Reporter for P&ID. My name is Christine Rech. I'm responsible for Universal Reporter in our company and especially for the part concerning P&ID. So today I'm going to give you an overview about the main functionalities. And before we start to do that, I want to explain that Universal Reporter is a tool which can work with data coming from different sources. One of them is P&ID. The other one is S3D. We decided to separate this into separate webinars. So today we're going to discuss about this part, and my colleague Stefan will take care in a few weeks about the 3D part. In addition, it is also possible to include data coming, for instance, from PDS, but also clients who have their in-house applications with possibilities to generate Excel reports. They can include that data into Universal Reporter, and the same functionality that you will see in a few moments is also available with data coming from these external applications, like, for instance, Excel. As you can see here, we have these arrows going from left to right. This means this is the extract part. Data is extracted and a snapshot is generated. But for some applications, we also have an arrow going back in the other direction. And this means that here we also have an edit adapter, which is able to change data in the authoring tool. So this means Universal Reporter is not only a generic reporting engine, it is also an interface that will allow you to change data for PIDs or for 3D objects, and then you can press a button and the button will write it back to the authoring tool, of course doing some checks in between. And since we talk about writing back, the export is done using mainly SQL. The write back is done with the tools API, which means all the necessary history flags and everything that goes with it goes into the PID database or the 3D database. Because we had a very strong requirement from clients to not only generate reports, but also to make modifications in Excel and import them back in, we created a quite powerful import function which can take data from an Excel file and import it into Universal Reporter. Universal Reporter will react as if a manual input was done on these values, and then the user can decide to write them to the application or eventually to revert the changes so that he or she can make another import and then eventually write back. So this is the logistic. And now we are going into details. So I want to explain a little bit how does the P&ID ReportAdapter work. So this is the slide which I have. As you see, the P&ID ReportAdapter is looking at an active P&ID plant. And from that plant, it is possible to extract selected drawings. Of course, it is also possible to extract all the drawings in one shot. And if this checkbox here is selected, then also a copy of the PID files will be created next to the snapshot that you see down here. And this means that we also have the possibility to visualize components in the PIDs, in this case using Smart Sketch. So here on the right side, you can see the result. We have the snapshot, which is an MDB. But we also have an IGR folder which is located next to the snapshot, and this folder contains the drawings that were selected with this button. What I also want to mention is that these commands here, they will always extract from the current data, which means the latest status of the PIDs. This one here would give you the possibility to also extract frozen data, revision information, but assuming that a version is associated to the revision, then you can get a snapshot that is not looking at the current, which is looking at the revision. In addition, it's not only possible to select different drawings, you can also configure what attributes you want to extract. So this means we have here an attribute selection interface, and everything that is placed on the right side will be placed into the snapshot. So what we have done inside the adapter, we have gathered attributes from different groups or areas, and the combination of those selected attributes will go into one table in UniversalReporter. So this means, for instance, from this table, you can create equipment lists also with nozzle information if requested. From here, you can create something like a line list also with inline component information. And here you can create a list of OPCs and eventually even work with a list of drawings if you want to have a look at drawing attributes. So much to the adapter. In the next slide, I have placed a screenshot of the tabular view inside UniversalReporter. This means you can see the different content which is located in those different tables. And UniversalReporter has a possibility to switch, of course, from one table to the other. Here you can select for each table which attributes you want to see, the sequence of these attributes and so on, and you can place them in a certain order, and in the end they will be stored in what we call a view. And here you can already see we have some gray attributes, we have some white attributes, and the difference here is the permission. So usually with our, let's call them default permissions, you can modify things like pressure, temperature, eventually also size, but you cannot modify the item tag, you cannot modify the drawing to which an item belongs. But there are some little possibilities to extend those possibilities and even to implement an attribute permission setup. Okay, of course, one of the most important features is the ability to create reports. So as you see here in this list, there is a green button which, if clicked, will start the Create Report interface. And in this interface, you can create reports from the data that you see in the views. And there are some little extras here. For instance, it's possible, of course, to work with templates, but you could also create a very simple report that doesn't have any template as a basis. And you can also add the code lists into the report. So for instance, if you would check this one, then later on, if you make changes, you have the code list values available in the report, and you can change those values according to the requirements inside Smart P&ID. So these are the values that come with the report adapter from the P&ID database. A very important function is the possibility to change values and later on write them back to the authoring tool. So here you can see if we work with a list of lines, the user could modify pressure, temperature. In the moment when one modification is done, a new column will rise here called old value of, in this case, design max pressure, and the user can see what was in before. His own input will be marked in blue. And then there are possibilities to reset those changes and start again if necessary, but also the possibilities to use the button Write Changes to SmartPlan P&ID. And in that case, the changes will, of course, be pushed towards the authoring tool. And the result will be visible in another column I will show you later. It is called it's kind of the success message, or if something went wrong, you will see what was the reason, for instance, a read-only attribute or some invalid value, and you will see that right away in the interface of UniversalReporter. Something that was very useful for a lot of clients, and of course still is the import from Excel function. With the import from Excel function, you can take one of the views. You can generate a report with the data inside that view. It doesn't have to be a template. It can be just a straight report. Then the user can make modifications into the report. So for instance, here there are changes to these values. And then he can use the import from Excel function, which is a generic function, valid also for 3D, for instance. And the user needs to decide the first time he makes such an import, which item should be used as a key column and which attributes he wants to update. So by drag and drop, he can just push them to the left and to the right. And then when he clicks the import button, the content of the Excel file will be compared with the data in the grid. And if everything is fine, then the values will be visible here as changes. The columns will be created with the old values. So it's kind of the same process like a manual import, just that in this case, it comes from an Excel file. Okay, and another thing that can be helpful, of course, is especially for PIDs, which are where the data is stored in, of course, a lot of different files, that the components which you are looking at inside the tabular view in Universal Reporter can also be highlighted in graphics. And therefore, we created a possibility to use a right mouse highlight command, of course, only if the graphic is available. And then Universal Reporter will look what is here behind this row. So to what does the row refer to? So in this case, it is an equipment, but it could also be an equipment and also a nozzle information. And then those components will be highlighted in Smart Sketch. And in case two drawings are available for those components, then they will both open and all the components will be highlighted separately in each drawing so that you can use it, for instance, to follow up pipe runs, to make checks on different data and so on. Okay, so what is it that I'm going to show in the live demo? I will show how you can use Universal Reporter to make data consistency checks on PIDs. I will also show how you can create reports and eventually use them for changing information inside Universal Reporter and later on write it to PID. And I will also show for both of these use cases, how does the graphical visualization help to find certain objects. Okay, then I will switch to the live demo. And first, we will have a look at the report adapter. As you see here, this is SPID drawing manager with all the drawings that are located within the areas and units. And here I have the report adapter. It also has the possibility to change the active plant, but you can also do that with drawing manager. It's kind of the same function that is here behind the scenes. And as I already mentioned, you have the possibility to choose all drawings, selected drawings, or associated data, which is kind of a filter information. So if you choose selected drawings and then click on extract, you will get more or less the same interface like here, where you have the possibility to choose which drawings you want to extract or not. And these three, they look at live data. This one, if clicked, will give you the possibility to choose from the revisions inside the PID plant. So in this case, the first revision is the one with the oldest date. Yeah, the last revision would be the one with the newest date, and then you will see all the different drawings and their revision information. That see, this one they have A, this one has Y. But only if they have a version associated. This is very important. If they have no version, they will not appear because there is no data behind it. If there is only the letter A defined in Drawing Manager. But of course, you can also select what we call static revisions, like all the drawings having revision A, and then you can check them all, and then you could export them and have the same possibility to look at the data inside Universal Reporter. But of course, the revision data cannot be modified. You can only create reports or compare maybe with some other snapshot. Okay, as I already mentioned, this checkbox will copy the PID files. And this is the location of the snapshot that we created from this plant. And if you want to also configure attributes, there is a button over here, Attribute Configuration. For those of you familiar with the SPID adapter for UPV, it is more or less the same interface, so they will already know how to use it. And in here, you can select attributes from the different tables, and you can put them on the right side, and they will all go into the snapshot, and they will be later available in the grid of UniversalReporter. What I also want to mention is that custom attributes will, of course, also show, so they behave the same like existing attributes. And in some areas, we even created additional attributes. For instance, here in the equipment nozzle area, there was a question from clients if it's possible to also extract the multiple representation as a value so that people know if this equipment has that status or not. So this is something that we can calculate at extraction time, and you can see it later on. And last thing I want to explain here is that for the OPCs, all the attributes that are selected for the OPCs, they will automatically be part of a check function within UniversalReporter so that you can check if they have the same value or not when the OPCs are connected. Okay, so much to the data extraction part. We now go to the interface of UniversalReporter, and you see it has here the list of tables. You can switch from one table to the other, and the data grid will always reflect the table that you have activated. As I already mentioned, we have gray columns which are read-only. We have white columns which can be modified. This I'm going to show in a few moments. And in here, we will start with a little exercise. If we want to search for a certain equipment name, for instance, we want to know, do we have equipments with 240 in the number? We can just use star 240 in this little autofilter line, and they will show. If we want to see how many pumps do we have in the system, or do we have pumps, we can use star pump and find out the pumps. And if we only want the pumps that have an item tag, we can use the not null here, and automatically you see the filter is applied to the grid. And then, of course, we have the possibility to take the filters away by deleting them, but also by using right mouse clear column filter. So these are just some very, very basic functions inside the grid of UniversalReporter. And if we want to look for something a little bit more special, we could create a new view. A new view is a view with empty fields for all the tables, and then go to, for instance, inline component pipe runs. And here we could have a look if we have duplicate component names, which can be the case, of course, if the validation is not set up to check for the duplicates. So we can activate the item tag, and then we can activate the count function of the SPID for the item tag. And as you see here, we have 55 inline components with no name. We have 2 that are called V1 and 3 which are called VG3. And if we use from here the right mouse highlight function, the graphic will open and the 2 components will be displayed. And you can see that how they are located in the drawing, and later on you could correct them in the PID and export one more time. And then this counter, of course, will not be set to 2 anymore. Another thing that we could do is to check for pipe runs. So we can use the item tag of the pipe runs, and then we can use, for instance, the count of SPID, and then we can see how many runs do we have for each tag. But we could also use the count of drawing name, and then we can see that we have some pipe runs that are crossing drawings, and the highlight function will also open 2 different drawings or 3 different drawings and will highlight the lines inside those drawings. And I think it's a pretty easy way to check for pipe runs once you have this function available. Okay, so this was about, let's say, the specialties that you can do for regular checking, like duplicate valves, pipe run check, and so on. Now I will switch here to this view and open the table OPCs. This is the list of OPCs that were extracted with these drawings. And you see it has the item tag that is connected, the fluid code, and so on. And in here is a check function, highlight OPC differences. And this check function will check if there are single OPCs which have no pair, but it will also check if there are OPCs connected to the wrong objects. So here, for instance, is a very clear example, the same OPC number, but connected to completely different pipe. And I think this is a very valid output that you can export to Excel and then use to make the corrections in your plant. Okay, now I'm switching to the next topic. The next topic is to create reports. And we will start with the simple way of creating reports. We will just click on the green button and click on Create Report. And then Universal Reporter will just copy the data that it sees in the grid to an Excel file. So pretty easy. What you have in the grid is copied to Excel. And then we can go one step further. We can say that we want to use a template, which is quite easy to create, but we also want to add the code list to the report. And then we have the same data, but it has, of course, a different look and feel because it is placed in a template. And also we have access to the code lists. And this means, you see, this is the template. You have the complete content, but the fields which do have a code list, like material of construction, you could access inside Excel the content of the code list. And also for any other field that is code listed, you have the possibility to work inside the Excel file with these values. And of course, the same is valid for pipe runs. So we can also use a template here. We can also add the code list here. And we will have a nicer looking report that has pressure temperature values inside and fluid code and so on. And also the possibility eventually to use the code lists when you want to make changes. So here, for instance, the code list is also available. And of course, also for nominal diameter. Okay, so this is about short the report creation. And our next step will be that I show you how to change data and write it to PID. So we are going to, for instance, take this filter, decide to change this value and call it filter 1. And then we will change the material of construction for a motor, for instance, M6. And you see automatically the old value columns are available. It is possible to revert single changes, complete column changes, or the complete table. So I'm resetting just this value, and then the column disappears because there is no old value anymore. And this change I want to write back. And then I'm using the write changes to SmartPlan PID. I am pressing the OK button, and now the API is triggered. And the change goes into the BPM5 plant. And you see this update status, which tell me that it was successful. But of course, I can also double check by clicking here, and then I can open the log file. And the log file will tell me that this item type with this SPID was changed, and the writing is done, and everything worked fine. So this is, we always log the things that are happening, and you can see all the results in a log file. And the next thing we are going to do, as a last example, we are going to export this report one more time with template. And we are going to make some small changes in the report. So I'm going to rename this filter one more time, change the material of construction. I forgot to click the button with the code list, as you see, so I make the modification just manually. And here I switch to 230 and then we save it. And now we are using the import from Excel function, which is a generic function. We select the report. And we have to use the right header line information. The header row was in line number 5 inside Excel. This is something that also can be pre-configured. And then we go to next. And with this interface, we have to tell the software, please use this as a key and update the columns, these 3, for instance. And then I can click on the import button. And the import button will take the values from the report, will put them on top of the grid. If there is something that I might not like, I can revert it with the reset button, and then I can use the same command again, write changes to SmartPlant P&ID, press the OK button, and make the changes. And then, as you see, the values will go to SPID. And in this case, for instance, the drawings, these two, they will get the out of date flag. So if I would go to customize the view and take this status, you will see those triangles. And you have now 2 possibilities to update. You can use the update function, which would update the labels in case there are any referring to those attributes, but it would also be sufficient to start SmartPlant P&ID, the drawing, and then the update will take place automatically. Okay, so this is what I wanted to show. I hope it was interesting for you. I guess some of you are already using UniversalReporter. Yeah. Let me know if you have questions. And other than that, of course, I will switch to my last slide and thank you for your attention. And I will now check for the questions. Yes, of course, all the sessions are recorded and everyone who is part of this session will get automatically after 2 days, maybe, the link to the recording. Another question which I see, is it possible to also use something like system editing when writing back, for instance, when changing values that refer to piping components as well? Yes, we have 2 writeback functions. One is for the single objects and the other one is called writeback with system editing. And that one will also trigger the rules inside SPID. Okay, then thanks a lot and have a great rest of the week. Goodbye.